Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott, I'm the Emperor of Stomaria, and today I'm pleased to announce that plans are being made for a Micronational event in the British Isles. Now, before I get started on this video, there are several other things that I will go over in the next week or so. I know it's been a while since my last video. I think it's probably 10 or 11 days at this point. I want to talk about the visit to the Kingdom of Lithua, how that went. Spoiler, it went great, but I want to go over some of the details regarding the trip to Lithua. For our YouTube channel, because I know there are, we have discussed this on our YouTube, on our Facebook page and elsewhere, but we do have a YouTube dedicated audience that will not be aware of how all of this, how it all went. So I will go over that with you in the next few days. I also want to talk about the production of additional Stomarian staters. We are getting more and more people now investing into the Stomarian staters, next batch of Stomarian staters, which is great to see. I'll go into this in more detail later on, but I mean, somewhere between £500 and £1,000 in the next week or two is likely to be confirmed as investments from half a dozen to a dozen individuals and micronations, which is great because it means that it's funds that I don't have to find myself. And it means that the distribution of Stomarian staters will be instantaneous. Everyone will get, the equivalent number of staters based on the amount they invest. But I'll get on to all of that in a few videos' time. What I want to talk about today is something that's come about partly because of the trip to Lithua, but mostly because of the recent meeting, the video call meeting that I had with King Raoul of Wayward, Queen Neve of Molossia, and Prince Alexander of Moreland. Now, this is one of our sort of semi-regular video call meetings. We haven't had one in probably a couple of months now, actually, because everyone's just been busy with one thing or another, and these things happen. But we had a meeting a couple of days after the trip to Lithua. Myself and Raoul, we said, how great it was and all the rest of it. And one of the topics of conversation was that Wayward was initially planning in September to have a Waywardian event. So, it would be for Waywardians only. Other people might be able to come. They would have to pay a fee for that, whereas Waywardians wouldn't. And then they sort of reached out to us and said, well, you're the Emperor of Stomaria. Would you like to attend this event as well? I mean, maybe we can set up a stall, you can give a speech or something like that, like a Q&A as well, or, something to that effect. And I said, yeah, I'd be interested. And then we said, well, what about Prince Alexander of Moreland and the Morelandians? What about Queen Neve of Molossia and the Molossians? I mean, there's no reason why they can't come as well. And said, yeah, we'll do that. And then we went, after the trip to Lithua, we went, well, why don't we have Lithua there as well? And it sort of just went from a strictly Waywardian event to, well, maybe we could just make this a, Micronations that are affiliated in some way with the Empire of Stomaria, either Micronations that form a part of its empire or external allies like Lithua. And it's sort of gone even further than that, because the suggestion was, well, why don't we just have other micronationalists and micronations from other parts of the British Isles and Europe, or indeed wherever else. Why don't we get them to come this way? We could make this a MicroCon for the British Isles. It won't be called that. We're still coming up with a sort of name for it. I mean, it's quite tricky, because we want to make sure, I mean, maybe we don't need a name, but the term fair and festival has been sort of bandied about. We're hoping to make it a couple of days long event. There's going to be, the idea is to have sort of stalls for Micronations and Micronationalists that form a part of those Micronations if they want to sell their wares. Wayward and Molossia in particular are quite paganistic Micronations, so I expect to see a lot of things like, you know, skulls and antlers and crystals and things like that. But there will, I'm sure, be a whole range of sort of merchandise that people can buy. But also we want to have like tournaments and having Micronations with their national sports competing against one another. I think that would be quite good as well. And obviously, you know, like I said, Q&A sessions or meet and greets, that sort of thing. And you know, like I said, this is very early stages. This is just like an off the cuff, well, why can't we do something like this sort of moment at this time. And so what we've decided in principle is that we will be inviting other Micronations and Micronationalists to this event, which we're hoping at this point to take part either on or around the spring equinox in 2023. So it gives us plenty of time to sort of iron out the details in terms of location, in terms of how it's going to work. So that's the initial plan in place. It's not much of a plan, but that's what we've got so far. We've got a rough date and a rough idea of what we want to do. Now, in terms of the actual location, this is going to be primarily like a European, British Isles sort of gig, I suppose, in the sense that I don't expect many Micronations from outside of that sort of region to get involved, because, you know, this isn't like some grand micronational affair in the same way that, you know, traditional media would paint MicroCon. This will be perhaps the European or the British equivalent, because you just very rarely get to have many Micronations come together on that kind of scale. Even if we had a dozen Micronations around that sort of scale, I mean, that would be, you know, a milestone in terms of the gathering of Micronations. Certainly in these parts, I think. I can't honestly point to an event or a time where anything more than that happened. You do get Micronational leaders sort of bumping into one another and having these meetings either one-to-one, or maybe you get two or three. I mean, we only had the 3 Micronations on the Monday just gone. Myself representing Stomaria, and then King Raoul with Wayward, and then Princess Claire of Lithua. And that was an event in itself. And if we can sort of, you know, 10x that, if we can get 10 times the number of people, you know, get their Micronationalists and their families to come together, and then maybe open it up to the public. I don't know. It depends. I mean, it depends what the goal of this is, I suppose, because we want to advertise our respective Micronations to each other. Obviously, we want to talk about who we are and what we're striving to do. But we have always been of the opinion that if we want to expand and grow and achieve our objectives, we need to reach out beyond the micronational community. We want to reach out to the general public, people whose interests might not instinctively be micronationalism, but an aspect of micronationalism. So, for instance, people with an affinity, with a love of sound money, for instance, like gold and silver, who collect gold and silver, who buy gold and silver because they understand the flaws of fiat currency. They might be drawn to Stomaria through that. Or you have like various reenactment groups, or historical reenactment groups, or just live action role players, or something like that. They look at the costumes and the attire, they might get drawn in by that aspect of it. Or for particular religious or spiritual groups, or such as paganism, might be naturally drawn to Micronations like Wayward or Molossia, which have that kind of belief system sort of enshrined in that Micronation. So there are different ways in order to attract people from the outside and sort of pique their interest. And a lot of the time, obviously, people sort of laugh it off or not want to take it any further. But for every 10 people that don't want to get involved, there's one person out there that will, and that's the one person you've got to keep an eye out for. So whether or not we open up to the general public in its entirety, I don't know. Whether or not it'll be ticketed, I don't know. Whether or not there'll be fees, I don't know. But I just wanted to make this sort of pre-announcement, if you like, of our intention to host or co-host a Micronational event in the British Isles, which is at this time going to be open to Micronations across the globe, technically, but more likely to be those based in the British Isles and particularly Northern Europe, but I suppose Europe in general. Like I said, further afield, I don't think it's worth their time. They're welcome to come if they want to, but I think this is going to be more of a European and British-centric kind of event, which is, fine as far as I'm concerned, because, you obviously have MicroCon, I think it's every couple of years, and that's always in sort of North America. I think maybe the last one was in Canada, maybe. I think one of them was in Canada anyway, but then it's just in the United States. I think that this one, is it Las Vegas they're going to? I mean, Micronations like us, this far afield, across the world, we just don't have the time, the energy, the resources to go to these sorts of events. Travel half the world over with our young families, certainly in my case, or in the case of the Kingdom of Wayward, for instance, to spend 2 or 3 days doing Micronational meetups. Like I said, for this, it's going to be slightly different from MicroCon, I suspect, because we are going to be focusing a bit more heavily on the sort of the real world economic growth aspect, because our shared vision within the Empire of Stomaria certainly is that we have these meetups slightly more regularly at some point, where we do have stalls and a micronational market with micronations exchanging goods and services with one another in a like a market environment. That's sort of the ideal for us. That's what we are hoping to achieve going forward. And going long term, we'd like to see the various sort of plots of land and territory that we acquire and those owned by other micronationalists being utilised for that purpose, to create these individual trading hubs across the British Isles, and again, to some extent, Northern Europe. So, I mean, that's the game plan, and an event like this is hopefully going to showcase some of that. But we do want to make it a fun affair as well. We do want to make it, a bit more fair-like. So, something that a lot of people in the UK, I'm sure, would appreciate. But yeah, I think that's all I need to cover for this particular video at this moment in time. So just keep your eyes peeled for future updates. And if you are a Micronation that would be interested in attending this kind of event, then do let me know. Because as I said, location-wise, it's yet to be fully decided, but I'm quietly confident that it will be somewhere in the British Isles, probably in the southeast, southwest, or Midlands of England, probably around that neck of the woods, only because I suspect that's where would be most convenient for Micronations to gather. But it really depends on who comes forward and where those Micronations and Micronationalists are based. Because if 90% of the attendees are likely to be from the north of England, for instance, then we'll obviously host it in the north of England, because it would make sense for us to do so. But anyway, all by the by, keep your eyes open. So if you did enjoy this video and you wanted to become a part of the Stomarian community, then please feel free to do so through our Patreon campaign, the link of which I shall leave in the description below as always. You can also find the details of the other Micronations involved in Stomaria in the description below as well. But if you did enjoy this video, then please feel free to give it a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.